Biology, and chapter 16, which is reproduction. In chapter 15, we looked at drugs. We finished the drugs, and now to chapter 16, we're looking at reproduction. Reproduction is divided into two, and the first part of it, which normally happens in plants, it's called the asexual reproduction. And we're looking at that branch of reproduction today, the asexual reproduction. Okay, reproduction is the ability to bring young ones alive. Okay, the ability for us to fertilize, or ability to bring young species to alive. So today we're looking at the asexual reproduction. Okay, before we continue, let's give like 2 minutes to listen to our tutorial.
This video is on the topic of asexual reproduction. Let's start by thinking about what asexual reproduction is. It's a form of reproduction that only involves one parent rather than two, so there's no fertilization or fusion of gametes such as a sperm or egg. There is no mixing of genetic information, so the offspring produced are all genetically identical to each other and their parent. They can also be known as clones. Many organisms reproduce asexually. It is common in the plant world, where plants can produce runners as seen here. Or a cutting can be taken and the cut part of the plant will produce roots and become a whole new plant. Other organisms include some fungi, bacteria and other parasites, and also some animals such as starfish, aphids, and even some species of shark. For those of you studying the extended syllabus content, there are many advantages of organisms carrying out asexual reproduction. These include that no energy is wasted on trying to find a mate. There is often a rapid reproduction cycle, so it is much faster than sexual reproduction. It often leads to many identical offspring. This is particularly useful in the agricultural world and the production of crops. Other advantages include that the organism can quickly colonize a local area, and also successful and useful traits are passed on to offspring. This, however, can be a disadvantage, as the population has no variation within its genetic information. So if individuals are affected by disease or mutation in their DNA, it is likely to affect the whole population, which could be catastrophic to the species. Examiners will often give some information in an exam question in the form of a diagram or some text. You will need to identify which type of reproduction the information is referring to, so let's take a look at that now. The drawing shows a potato plant producing new tubers, which are actually potatoes. Buds on the stem of the parent plant produce structures called stolons. The new tubers are formed at the ends of the stolons. The tubers can grow into potato plants. Explain which type of reproduction is shown by this potato plant, and you'll be awarded 2 marks. We can see in the image that the tubers are attached to the parent plant by these structures called stolons. We are told that the tubers can grow into new potato plants. All this information tells us that asexual reproduction must be taking place. This is because the tubers are grown from the parent plant. Even though a flower is present, there is no information about pollen or pollination, so there's no sexual reproduction or fertilization taking place. Be sure to read and take in all the information given in a question like this. Here we can see a second exam-style question. The green aphid lives on rose bushes in the UK in the summer. In spring, aphids that are hatched from eggs are all female. They can produce offspring without male aphids. Name the type of reproduction that these female aphids carry out to produce offspring. Describe how the offspring will compare to the parent aphid, and again this is for 2 marks. We can see from the information provided that no males are involved, only females. So this tells us that one parent is required, so this must be asexual reproduction. This means that the offspring will all be genetically identical to the parent aphid. In summary, asexual reproduction involves only one parent. The offspring are all genetically identical to each other and their parent. Students studying the extended content are required to know the advantages and disadvantages, which are that no time or energy is wasted in finding a mate or producing gametes. Many identical offspring are produced, so an area can be colonized quickly and easily. The disadvantage is that there is no variation, meaning that any disease or disadvantageous traits can affect the whole population. Don't forget to check out all our other fantastic revision resources here at Save My Exams.
Okay, so let's begin. So the little tutorials to put us into check as we start this chapter. Okay, so we say asexual reproduction is a type of reproduction that involves one parent. A type of reproduction that involves one parent. Does not involve two parents. A type of reproduction that involves only one parent. Okay, that's one. And then another thing is that the offspring produced, they are genetically identical. They are genetically identical because they are as a result of cloning. It's like it's just you clone the organism. This is very common in plants. Okay, asexual reproduction is super common in plants. You find also in organisms like bacteria. You find also in organisms like bacteria, fungi, and some animals like some fish in the water, like shark and so on and so forth. Okay, so but this is very common in agriculture. If you see farmer planting cassava, planting yam, they're all using asexual reproduction methodology. All the plants are using asexual reproduction methodology to produce the new crops. Okay, so this is the method that is used in agriculture, that is used in farming, okay, to produce the new crops. Okay, so we go to look at them and we look at the organisms that produce their young ones alive asexually. And after that, we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of asexual reproduction. First and foremost, we say in asexual reproduction, it involves only one parent. It does not involve two parents. For example, if you take a cassava stem, okay, if a cassava stem grows into a cassava, if you cut the bud, if you cut the stem, a small bud can spring. You can put it on the soil, and a small bud can spring out again and grow the same cassava. That will be identical, genetically identical to the original parent. 100% identical with themselves or to themselves, and also 100% identical to their parents. So asexual reproduction is a type of reproduction that involves only one parent. That's the first thing to take note of. The second thing to take note of in this chapter is that they are genetically identical. Genetically, the offspring produced in asexual reproduction are genetically identical to one another and to their parents. Genetically identical to one another and to their parents. Okay? Genetically identical. So this is another thing to take home in asexual reproduction. Another thing to take home, beside the fact that it involves only one parent, another thing to take home is that the offsprings are genetically identical to themselves and to their parents. Genetically identical to themselves and to their parents. And then we say organisms where you can find where this takes place. We name them. Plant is the biggest gainer of asexual reproduction. The biggest organisms that are reproducing asexually. Okay, number one is plants. Number one is plants. Okay, these plants, sometimes they use tubes. The tubes is used for food storage, like yam. If you've seen food like potato, okay, potato, sweet potato, yam, okay, they store the food in the tube. They store the food in the tube. That tube, a part of it can be cut and grow the same plant again. So you can cut the yam, you can cut the yam and replant the tube to get a new exact same plant as the yam plant, or a new exact same plant as the cocoyam plant or cocoyam plant or whatever you call it, potato plant, sweet potato plant. So any of this one they use tuber. Okay, the plant, we have different forms they use. They use tubes to reproduce asexually. They use tube. The bud will spring out. The bud from here, the new plant will start to grow from the bud of the tube. all parts of the tube is able to have the bud. The bud springs out, the new plant starts to grow. Okay. Also, some other storage apart from the tube. Which other storage we can get where the new plants can grow from apart from the tube? We have stem. Okay, stem like the cassava stem. If you take the cassava, you cut the stem, you can see the new one can start to grow. Or a method called the runner method. A method called the runner method. The male plant branched off to touch the ground, to touch the soil. The male plant branches off to touch the soil. Branches off to touch the soil. Meaning this one branches off to touch the soil, and then a new one starts to grow as a result of that. So this is called runner. It has bud every time interval. It has bud. Okay, when it touches the ground, the new plant starts to grow. The new plant starts to grow. This is our soil. This is the soil. The male plant touches this, and then the new one starts to grow from here, from the soil. Okay, and it will be similar to this. It will be super identical to the male plant. So these are the different ways in which asexual reproduction do take place in plant. Another organism, this is for plant. Another organism capable of this, number 2, is bacteria. Okay, we're going to look at the bacteria first. We're going to explain the bacteria first. How bacteria reproduce asexually. How bacteria reproduce asexually. So we're going to look at the bacteria first. Okay, the bacteria, they carry out what we call the binary fission. Binary fission, they grow, they cell divide, cell division. They double. All the content will genetically mutate inside the bacteria and split into 2. Okay, and split into 2. And then 2 bacteria will be produced or will result out of 1 bacteria. So we're going to look at that. The process is called binary fission. Binary fission. So the bacteria, they use the method of binary fission to reproduce asexually. To reproduce asexually. In this case, the cell content inside the bacteria begins to double. The content of the cell in the bacteria cell, the content all begins to double. And a time we reach, then it will split. The cell itself will divide into 2. And then you have what we call a new 2 plants resulting from 1 bacteria plant. New 2 organisms resulting from 1 bacteria organism. And then those 2 will also probably, after some time, produce another 2, becomes 4, and so on and so forth. So this process is called the binary fission. The binary fission is the process the bacteria uses to produce a plant. Now let's go through this quickly. Okay, let's have an overview of this section. We said the asexual reproduction does not involve the sex cells or any fertilization because it does not involve 2 gametes. It does not involve 2 gametes. You don't need the male gamete and you don't need the female gamete to produce the new organisms. You don't need 2 gametes to produce the organisms. So it's just 1 parent that uses this methodology. Only 1 parent plant produce the next plant. Okay, so it requires only 1 parent plant is required. So there is no fusion of gametes and no mixing of genetic information from the 2 parents. No mixing of genetic from the male and the female. No mixing of genetic material from the 2 parents. Okay, in this case, this is ruled out. There's no fusion. No, we can say categorically right like this. We say no fusion. Only fission takes place. No fusion of 2 cells, 2 sex cells. There's no fusion of such. So this type of reproductions where there is no fusion, no fertilization, is called asexual reproduction. It's called asexual reproduction. Now, more specifically, let's take a look at, say, as a result, the offsprings, they will become what? Genetically identical to the parents and to each other. And this is what we call the clone. We can call, because they are super genetically identical, the offspring that is produced, they are genetically identical to each other and to the parent. Hence, we say that this is a asexual reproduction. This method can only be asexual reproduction. Okay? So, still on this, now we say the offsprings will be identical to themselves and to their parent. Now, let's take a look at example of asexual reproduction. We start with bacteria. And remember, before we go into details of using bacteria to explain this concept, let's give the third organisms that can also undergo asexual reproduction. The third organism is fungi, the fungi. Okay, the fungi can also go into division process to produce more, using cell division process to produce more of its organisms alike. And these organisms that are produced will look very much like themselves and again also look like their parents. So these are some organisms that undergo. And then the fourth one is some animals. Some animals, especially like the fish. Some animals, so we can write the animals. Not all the animals you know, not mammals. Okay, mammals do not reproduce asexually. Okay, not mammals, not reptiles and all of these things. But this happens in some fish family. Okay, fish family like shark, like dolphin. Okay, some fish family like shark and dolphin, they can reproduce asexually. Okay, fish family. You can find organisms that can reproduce asexually. You can find organisms that can reproduce asexually. Okay, so we mentioned 4 organisms that can reproduce asexually. We start with the big one, the plants. The big one, the plants. We talk about bacteria, we talk about fungi, and we talk about animals. Now let's take a look at it more extensively about bacteria. Let's look at bacteria for the first case study. Bacteria can produce exact genetic copies of themselves. They can produce the exact genetic copies of themselves. Okay, in a type of reproduction called the asexual reproduction, using a reproduction system called the asexual reproduction. And the method they use is called the binary fission. The method they use is called the binary fission. Now let's take a look at this bacteria content. Now this is the bacteria organisms. What you see here is the chromosomes, which is the genetic makeup of this bacteria. This chromosome is the genetic makeup or the genetic material of this bacteria. Okay? Now we have other content in the bacteria. These bacterial cells, after a while, the cell content begins to double. Everything inside begins to double. After a while, the bacterial content that's in the cell of bacteria, everything begins to double. Meaning this chromosome becomes 2. These cells, other small cell unit, becomes twice the number, and this the nuclei becomes twice. The Golgi ball becomes twice. Everything begins to be double. Everything begins to be double. So at some point again, the genetic material, that's the DNA. The genetic material is the DNA. The DNA, they have replicated themselves. You can see the DNA has replicated itself. It has doubled. Then after a while, cell division will take place, and the whole bacterial cell will split into 2. We replicate and split into 2. Cell division by process of binary fusion. By process of binary fusion. By process of binary fusion will happen. Okay? Cell division by process of binary fusion will happen. So the whole bacteria will split into 2. The whole bacteria will split into 2. This process is called binary fusion and produces 2 genetically identical daughter cells. So this process of binary fusion is used by the bacteria to produce 2 identical daughter cells. It's used by this bacteria. You see, one bacteria has succeeded from here. This is the beginning of it. One bacterial cell has succeeded in producing first. The first step is that it swells up. The content, the cell content begins to double. Everything becomes twice what it was. The content of the cell becomes twice. After it has swollen up, everything becomes twice. And then after it doubles, it splits into 2. Using a process called the binary fission. It splits into 2 to produce 2 bacterial cells using a process called the binary fission. And then if you take a look at this, you see the whole content of the original, the parent cell, the whole content of the parent cell is same. It's like cloning. It's same with the 2 daughter cells. It's same with the 2 daughter cells of this bacterial organism. The parent cell, all the content, you see the circular chromosomes, you see everything you see here in the parent bacteria or in parent bacterium is same with the 2 daughter bacteria. It's same with these 2 daughter bacteria. So the 2 are same with themselves and also same with the parent. That's why we say it's like cloning. It's like cloning. It's like cloning. And the process uses binary fusion. Okay, that's for bacteria. Now let's take a look at it. We say the bacteria produce exact genetic copies of themselves. the exact genetic copies of themselves. You can see these two daughter cells, they're exact, same copies of themselves. Okay? In a type of asexual reproduction called the binary fusion. Now plants can reproduce asexually, and the good part of the plant that can reproduce asexually, apart from bacteria, we've talked about bacteria, now we go to the second one, called the plants. The part of the plant that can reproduce asexually is called the bulbs and the tubes. Both the bulbs, like in onion, you know onion, if you take onion, it has bulbs. The onion can reproduce asexually, and the tubes also, like the yam, the potato, the sweet potato, okay, they can reproduce because their storage is in the root cells. Their storage in the root cells, since they store the food in the root cells, part of it can spring from the bud, can germinate from the bud. Okay, can germinate from the bud and produce exact same plant as the original plant. So we say plants can reproduce asexually using the bulbs and tubers, and these are the food storage organs of the plants, right? These two are one of the storage organs of the plant, the bulbs. Onion stores their food in the bulbs, and yam or potato stores their food in their roots. Okay, so they are food storage. Because they are food storage, then the bud can spring from there. The bud, B-U-D, can spring from the plant, from this area. Okay, and hence we produce the new plants which are genetically identical to their parent plants. Now let's take a look at this example. This is the parent plant. Okay, this is the lateral bud. This one is the lateral bud, and this is the flower bud. Okay, this is the flower bud. A bud is a short stem. Is a stem. A bud is a short stem with leaves or the remains of leaves, which act as the food storage organs that can develop into a new plant in the following year. So a new one can spring from here. So if you have onions from the flowery bud, the new plants can spring from there, and another onion will start to grow from there. Okay, this is how the growth process takes place. Now the remains of the leaves will start to grow. We start to grow and split into two identical ones. And you can see the new plants will grow from the lateral bud. The new one will start to grow from the small lateral bud that the onions has. Okay, the new plants will start to grow from the lateral bud and become exact two buds, producing two onion plants in that case. Now let's look at tubers. In the case of tubers, like let's say you have cassava plants or any tuber, okay, not cassava specifically, let's say you have yam plants or you have potato plants or cocoyam plants, any of the tuber crops, you plant them. The tube, you see, the tube, from the tube there's a bud. Where this is a new tube, one of the tube, there's a bud that can spring and start to grow. There's a bud that can spring and start to grow, producing the new parent, new daughter cells of the parent bud. Okay, you can see we have a lot, it has produced a lot of the bud, like yam or potato. In this, one of them or more of them will spring out and new plants will start to grow. So this is the process of asexual reproduction in plant. A tuber is similar to the bud that we talked about just now. They form from slowly fleshy or the ground stem buds from themselves, from the tubes, okay? Then they start to grow. The buds start to spring and a new plant start to grow. So we say some plants develop underground food storage organs that we develop into our next year plants. For example, the yam, you can cut the tube and replant the tube, and then a new plant will grow from there. A new plant will grow from there, from the tube. Okay, so this process is asexual reproduction. This process whereby you produce another yam tree from the previous one is called asexual reproduction. And they look exactly like their parent one, like cloning, what we call clone. Okay, exactly like the parent one. So some plant grows side shoots called the runner shoot. The third scenario, we've talked about the bud, using the lateral, wherein the new plants start to grow from the lateral bud. We've used example of tuber from plants. We say the tube has some bud where the new plants will germinate from or will grow from. The third case is a plant. Some plants, their shoots have what we call the runner shoot. This shoot will extend will extend and start growing subbud. Some grow subbud, roots will touch the soil, or roots, part of the bud will grow to the soil and form the roots, and the rest will start to grow like the parent plant. This plant will, after a while, looks exactly genetically identical to the parent. This is the plantlet. This is just a small plantlet, what we call the seedling. Okay, after a while, it will grow and be exact same as the parent plant. Exact same as the parent plant. So only one organism, one parent is needed for asexual reproduction. Like this one, growing and part of it branching to this way and growing a new plant called the runner. The runner is used, some plants has what we call the runner from their buds, which grows and produce a new plant. Okay, which grows to produce a new plant. So plants use some of these techniques to produce from the bulb, from the tubers, and from the runners. These are three areas where the plants grow and reproduce asexually. The three areas where the plants grows and reproduce asexually. One from the bulb. Bulb is same as stem. Two from the tubers, the tubes. The third one is from the runner. Okay? Now let's take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of asexual reproduction. For IGCSE, this is very important. First of all, the first advantage is that population can be increased very rapidly, very quickly, because this one does not take much time. Population can be increased. You can cut the stem and replant cassava stem and replant them in your whole field, all the farm field. Plant all the stem, cut some stem, bring, plant in your farm, and you produce the exact same cassava in a very large hectares of land. Okay, so the population of the organisms can be increased so very quickly, can be increased quickly. So this one big advantage, the population can be increased very quickly. Another advantage from asexual reproduction is that can exploit suitable environment quickly. Can use very nice environment and can produce quickly, especially if you are considering plants, especially in loamy soils. If you look at loam soils, we know we have three major types of soil: the loamy soil, the sandy soil, and there's another one, the loamy soil, the sandy soil, and there's one crazy soil. Okay, but the loamy soil is for agricultural purposes or exploit. So we use the loamy soils to grow our crops. So when you find such soil, you can exploit this suitable environment for the growing these plants asexually, or you exploring the asexual reproduction. Another advantage is more time and energy efficient. Okay, it's very energy efficient because you can, one man or one person or one family can have a very huge farm, okay, with same species, same clone cassava or same clone yam or same clone plant, any plant, potato plant, any plant you want to have in your area. You can have a huge of it while saving time and saving energy. Why saving time and saving energy? You save energy, you have so many. One plant can produce so many of its daughter plants. So these are advantage. Then we say in this type of, another advantage, the fourth advantage is that the reproduction is completed much faster than the sexual reproduction. This one is completed much faster, okay, because it saves time much faster than the other one. Now let's take a look at the disadvantage. One of the big disadvantages is that there is no variation. There is no genetic variation. It's just cassava. For example, if you cut cassava from Brazil, if you plant Brazil cassava, you just go to get that species of cassava. Even if you plant 10 hectares of land, you only get that species that you planted. There is no variation, okay? So there is no genetic variation in the population. It will just be that population of that species of cassava, and all the offspring will be genetically identical to the parent one that you planted, the stem that you planted, or the bud that you planted. If it's yam, it's the same thing. Everything will be coming from that same thing. So there is no variation. The danger is anywhere there is no variation is that if that species is subservient to disease, is subservient to any disease outbreak, then that disease outbreak will wipe off the whole thing. We wipe off the whole thing. Meaning that population is gone. The entire population will be gone. Okay, so that's one big disadvantage. There's no genetic variation. The second disadvantage is that population is very vulnerable to changes in the condition. The weather, it could be weather conditions, and only be suited for maybe only one type of habitat, may not be like suitable for so many different type of habitat. For example, if I go to Egypt, I may not be able to plant the plants that I can plant in Nigeria or in Guinea. I may not be able to plant them in Egypt or in the Middle East, okay, because it's desert. So you may not be able to plant those things. So the population is vulnerable to changes in the conditions, the weather conditions, or they're only suitable to one type of habitat sometimes, or most of the times. They're just suitable to one type of habitat. So what you can plant in one habitat in one location may not be suitable to be planted in another habitat in another location. So this is another form of disadvantage that we have in asexual reproduction. The third one is disease is likely to affect the whole population, and there is no genetic variation. So if there's disease outbreak, it will affect the whole thing because they're same thing. They're same thing. Okay? The same thing. You see, when coronavirus came, because we are not asexually produced, many people lived. Even though some people died, many people lived. But if we were one species that was weak to coronavirus, the whole species would have been wiped off. The whole species would have been wiped off by the coronavirus. But because we varied, okay, we varied in our gene, in our DNA. We are not same. We are not the chromosomes are not same, even if we are all same human being. But we vary. We are not exactly same. So many people are able to withstand it more than others. So many people still alive today. The disease was not able to wipe off almost everyone because we are not produced asexually. So asexual reproduction has this unique disadvantage in such that disease can easily wipe off the entire set of people, or set of not really people, set of organisms in this regard. So specifically in crop plants, asexual reproduction can be advantageous. It can be a good thing. It can be beneficial. Can be very beneficial in the sense that it means that the plant that has good characteristics will have high yield. These are the advantage. Okay, the ones that are disease resistant and they are handy, they all will have good yield. Okay, the one with good characteristics will have good benefit, and then can all be made to reproduce asexually, and then the entire crop will show the same characteristics. The entire crops will show the same characteristics because the reproduction system is asexual. They are genetically identical, and they are produced by one parent. Hence, everything about it will be exactly same. Okay, everything about it will be exactly same. So that's for plant. Okay, so we stop here for today's class.